Recording in progress.
Thank you. I'm going to call to order the Tuesday, December 9th, 2025 meeting of the Policy and Services Committee. May we move to roll call, please?
Chair Vinker?
Here.
Councilmember Stone?
Here.
Councilmember Liu?
Here.
For the record, all are present.
Thank you. Well, with that, we'll move to public comment for any items within the purview of this committee, but not on tonight's agenda. So do we have any speakers for public comment?
There are no requests to speak.
Okay, excellent. Then we'll move on to our first action item, item number 1, which is the auditor's presentation of the Contract Solicitation and Authority Levels Advisory Report. Do we have Ms. Murdoch with us?
Evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, committee members, Vice Mayor Vinker, Kate Murdoch, City Auditor. I'll be presenting the results of the Contract Solicitation and Authority Levels Advisory Report. And I just want to start by thanking City Management for helping the Auditor's Office identify this as an area to improve city processes and to deliver high-impact results. I want to particularly thank the Administrative Services Department and the City Manager Office for their collaboration and support in doing this project. So next slide, please. The objective of this advisory project was to assess the city's current contract solicitation thresholds for competitive bids, as well as signature authority levels, and benchmark the city's levels against that of peer agencies. Next slide, please. The city's procurement rules and regulations are outlined by the city's municipal code, which was last amended in 2016. And since that time, the cost of goods and services has increased substantially, resulting in a loss of purchasing power within city contracting and purchasing card procurement programs. Next slide, please. Our overall observation is that updating the city's procurement procedures will improve purchasing processes, eliminate administrative inefficiencies, and better align the city with peer and industry best practices. We noted that in addition to significant increases in costs, many peer cities have higher contract solicitation and signature authority thresholds, with most cities having updated their procurement policies sometime in the last 5 years. We also found that approximately half of the 15 benchmarked cities we looked at had adopted CUPCA, or the California Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act, which updates thresholds annually and currently sets the formal bidding threshold for construction projects at $220,000 as compared to the city's threshold of $85,000 for the same types of projects. We also found that some cities such as Fremont, Redwood City, and Sunnyvale have specified exemptions for certain items that don't typically benefit from the competitive bidding process, such as IT services, specialized professional services, or software renewals. Finally, in October of this year, the Federal Acquisition Regulation raised its threshold for micro purchases from $10,000 to $15,000. Next slide, please. We recommend the city consider increasing bid and related signature authority levels to reflect cost increases and also align with peer agencies. Consider incorporating an annual CPI adjustment into the code. Consider the pros and cons of adopting CUPCA, and also consider expanding exemptions in areas where competitive bidding processes are not helpful. Increasing P-card thresholds to restore card purchasing power, and incorporate a standard review process to revise procurement procedures on a more regular schedule. So this concludes my presentation, and I can hand it over to management, or if there are any questions, happy to answer questions.
Just on behalf of management, I'll be very brief. Appreciate the auditor's work and agree with the recommendations. And should the committee recommend and council approve the audit, we'll proceed with next steps.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do have one request to speak.
Okay.
Our first speaker will be Aram J. Aram J, you should now have permission to unmute yourself and speak.
I'm sorry, I wanted to speak on the proposed ordinance
supporting women's rights. So I'll pass until that issue comes before the council, the Policy and Services Committee.
Okay, I'll add you on for item 2. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, comments, questions?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ms. Murdoch. Just really a couple questions. One, are there thresholds in other cities where it automatically increases based on inflation each year or every other year?
Yes, there is one city, I want to say, I should have that on the tip of my tongue, but yes, there's definitely one city that does have an annual adjustment, CPI adjustment.
Okay, as far as like the local cities that.
And then about half of them have adopted CUPCA, and CUPCA has an annual threshold adjustment.
And how does the annual threshold adjustment work?
I believe that's, part of the state's process, and I can provide more information on that, but
Yeah,
those levels are set at the state level. So, and I believe they're based on CPI.
okay. And then for staff, kind of based on this, there then plans for next steps as far as making that adjustment, whether it be based on inflation or what the state's doing?
Correct. And again, I think we would need to come back to council for approval of any changes in our dollar thresholds. And so we'll make that a part of our recommendation. And we've got David Rembert here from Administrative Services Department who could elaborate if needed.
Okay. Thanks. I don't need any further detail now. I'm glad to see we're moving in that direction. I support the findings of the audit, the recommendations, and glad to hear staff's working on a solution. Thanks.
I think everything here makes sense, and I think this is a great audit, and I'm supportive of this. I just want to make sure that I understand the exact intuition and benefits here, so that there are these dollar thresholds that we would potentially change at the PCAR thresholds or at the $85,000 to $100,000 threshold. And for those contracts or purchases, rather than actually putting out for public bid and receiving maybe one bid or 0 bids, we could then go out and make those purchases on our own behalf. So in a case like that, there is some downside where there is ostensibly a less transparent bid that theoretically the public can see and bid for. But on the plus side, you can actually have more flexibility and probably get more bids in practice or more flexibility instead of trying to renew an IT contract and getting one bid from a sort of niche IT contractor. You can just directly renew with the software service provider or something like that. Or you could just more informally reach out to many, many different vendors and then get a better price at the end. So that's the right way to read what the trade-offs would hypothetically be at the margins, right?
I think that's definitely accurate. I would add, it also, in the case of informal solicitations, we could negotiate as opposed to just take bids that are received. So that's an additional upside. The other is really administrative burden and process and time involved with taking the more formal routes.
Yes, of course. I definitely should have included that. And I think this makes a lot of sense. It strikes me that a previous council member really, I'm probably going to butcher this, but really went through details through our bidding system and highlighted cases where we only got one bid or got a bid that seemed higher than another city's bid. And I actually really appreciated that level of caring about, every single contract. But I think the root cause isn't really tractably addressed by just saying like everything needs to go through more bidding process and more process. I maybe will miss some of the transparency. Well, we don't have a council member to give us those reports and slideshows anymore. So I'll maybe miss some of that sentiment. And I hope that there's some also way down the line where council can get some kind of readout of, okay, and here are the for the first couple years, $10 million of spending that we expedited, so we can just take a quick flip through and sanity check it and get some of that ability to introspect.
If I might, Councilmember, I can certainly reinforce that we do and would expect that in the follow-up actions we bring to you, we'll continue and expand on the reporting that we do. We do regular reporting, I believe it's semi-annually, to the council on informal agreements that we've entered into. So the transparency is definitely provided. It's simply provided in more of a batching than on a memo for everyone.
Yeah. Got it.
All right, well, thank you, and thank you, City Auditor, for this report. It does seem like it's due at this point, because nobody wants to see unnecessary processes and efforts if they're not serving the purpose. And I would, assume sort of along the lines of this discussion that there's still lots of incentives to get the best deal for the city. And I don't know if you have more to say about that, because you could give good examples, but I think allowing that professional discretion and up to a certain level is appropriate, respectful, and, so I'm.
Yes, thank you again. Just to reinforce that, once again, the ability to use informal processes does open the ability for us to negotiate on price, as opposed to the very structured formal process in which we're basically stuck with the bid that we've received or bids that we're received, and makes it more difficult for us to sort of exercise our market power.
Yeah, and your professional judgment as to which way to go on that. So I think, just because we raised the threshold for mandatory RFP, for some reason you thought that was the way to go, you could still do that for a lower dollar amount. Okay, I appreciate that. I just had one question, which is simply, the city auditor mentioned that some other cities had some exemptions to some of the formal bidding processes, or thresholds at least, and mentioned IT and software renewals, but there was some other category I didn't fully understand. It was specialized services, I think, and I'm just wondering if there's an example or two of that.
As a matter of fact, we do, but I'm sorry, go ahead, Kate, perhaps.
No, but you.
Well, I was just going to share that we do for city attorneys contracts to some level, I believe, and also for personnel investigations and the like. So there are very specialized services that we're able to not use the typical solicitation process.
So with city contracting, often the authority to select is separately regulated from the authority to approve based on amount. So the selecting legal services providers is to the discretion of the city attorney for all amounts. And I have contract authority up to $85,000, and above that, then council will see those contracts to approve those larger contracts.
I see, and that makes sense to me. So I concur with my colleagues. I would happily support accepting the audit. I think that's what we're supposed to do, and I would, I would, encourage and look forward to seeing the next steps, which I believe is the city coming back with express proposals for doing these various things, increasing authority levels, et cetera. I assume that would happen in the new year, what, Q2-ish, or? Welcome.
Thank you, David Ramberg, Assistant Director of Administrative Services. Yeah, so what we said in the report is that we would look to come back in 2026 So we'll be jumping on this right away. It's an important effort for us, and we look forward to bringing back some proposals.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you for being here. And hopefully it's somewhat of a morale boost, too, to staff to have that increased authority and trust from council. So,
That's
great.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess I need a motion to accept the audit.
So moved.
And just a reminder, it's a recommendation of council to accept it.
Yes, thank you.
I'll second.
All right, so Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on the motion to recommend accepting the audit? Thank you.
Chair Vinker,
Yes.
Councilmember Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Liu,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move to item 2, recommend City Council adoption of a local policy to implement the foundational principles of the United Nations Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, often referred to as CEDAW. So who has a presentation? Deputy City Manager.
Yes, thank you. This is really far away. Good evening, everyone. Chantel Cotton Gaines, Deputy City Manager. I'm joined here online also with Mr. Kojo Pierce, our Wellness and Belonging Project Manager. So I will give a very brief verbal update on this item. I wanted to start off by saying we're really excited to bring this before the committee. It's been a long time coming. It is included in our Equity Action Plan as one of our items. It's item 3.4, in case anyone wants to check the Equity Action Plan as well. But it's something that came through the Human Relations Commission in the past, as well as Policy and Services Committee, as well as going to City Council, giving us direction to write the ordinance. And so we're very grateful for the work from our City Attorney's Office, as well as some of the feedback we've received in our Human Services Division as well, to bring the item before you today. So the ordinance that is presented before you today includes aspects which are really just trying to capture how we are reflecting the principles of CEDAW, the Convention to End All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, shortly known as CEDAW, ways that we're trying to implement that into our day-to-day work at the city. And so in section 2, I'll just refer to the packet page as I run through this very quickly. This is packet page 35. We have local CEDAW principles that we are elevating in this particular ordinance. Our interest was to make sure that these are items that the city actually has some sort of jurisdiction over, that these are things that the city does. For example, other CEDAW ordinances includes healthcare, but that is not necessarily a body of work that the city has authority over. So something like that was not included in the way that it is in other places. So we have in here economic development. The city, taking into account, shall take appropriate measures to support the economic development of women and girls in Palo Alto by the elimination of any identified barriers in terms of employment and licenses, permits, et cetera. We're looking at the area of housing and homelessness as well, realizing that the needs of women and girls that are in the unhoused community are maybe different from some other individuals, and things like non-congregate shelter and other things are principles that we're keeping in mind as we're trying to expand our offerings to be able to support that portion of our community. Item C in the ordinance refers to political and civic engagement. This is really emphasizing in the most nonpartisan type of way, emphasizing encouraging voter registration, as well as educating all individuals, including women and girls, about their voting rights and the importance of civic engagement. And those are principles that the City Council has always elevated and recommended as well. Item D is community, library, and transportation services. The principles here being the city shall take appropriate and timely measures within the scope and authority to support women and girls in equal access to these very important community resources. And to the extent in which we have authority over services and systems, the city shall remove any identified barriers that we are aware of as well. The next section is related to a very important topic to our city, which is climate and sustainability. Here we point out that we will take gender responsive, culturally responsive measures to address specific vulnerabilities and needs of women and girls related to issues on climate adaptation and sustainability. and there's other information there. And so I think the underlying principle that we went forward with this ordinance is really trying to make sure that we're emphasizing where we are identifying barriers, that we will address those, similar to the work that we are trying to elevate in all the other items within our equity action plan and the city's wellness and belonging work. So upon recommendation from the committee this evening, this item will be forwarded to the city council for approval, and we will keep this as some of the foundational work in our wellness and belonging work. And so that concludes our staff presentation.
Well, thank you, Deputy City Manager Cotton Gaines. I am delighted to see this come before this committee. And before I expand upon that, I want to go to members of the public who might wish to comment on this.
Yes, we do have 5 requests to speak.
Terrific.
Our first speaker will be Steve L., followed by Cheryl S.
Hi, good evening, council members. My name is Stephen Lee. I'm very excited to see this item come before you today. I first got involved with CEDA back in 2016, 2017, when I was on the Human Relations Commission, and the HRC had spent about 7-8 months working on that. Lot of meetings, a lot of vivid discussion, and we were able to get to unanimity in recommending CEDA to the City Council. And then the community waited about a year or so before the council took it up. I think it was rescheduled 3 or 4 times, but each of those times, the folks in this room, plus many more, came before council and really talked about the need to enshrine CEDA into our local law. So this is a long time coming. It's been about 7 years since the council has first seen this, and I hope that it's not another 7 years before we see some of the actual concrete outcomes from this. And I just want to remind this body here that the ordinance was only designed to be sort of the beginning of this renewed effort and this renewed spirit. It's very foundational. So the quicker we can get moving on the ordinance, the faster we can get working on some of the systemic and day-to-day changes we need to make within the city's purview as enshrined in the various principles laid out in the ordinance. So thank you so much for your continued commitment to CEDA, and really looking forward to this moving forward.
Our next speaker is Cheryl S., followed by Roberta A.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Cheryl Spencer, a resident of Palo Alto since 1974. I have been addressing you and the City Council about the need for this ordinance based on CEDAW since February 2018. And so for this, so I'm very pleased that this ordinance, this draft, is come onto your agenda this evening. And just to show you, this is my folder on working on this, okay, for 7 years. I've known about it since 1979 when it was signed but not ratified by the US government. I would like to plead that it becomes a codified ordinance. It's currently shown as uncodified. As all the other city ordinances based on CEDAW, Santa Clara County, San Francisco, are all codified, okay? Which means that it's actually it's findable. It's in the collection of laws that our city is governed by. So if it's not in that place, then it's harder to find, okay? And people forget about it. And as Stephen said, we don't want to forget about it. This is the beginning of trying to get some changes, okay? So I would ask that you make it a codified ordinance, okay? Which I'm sure the city manager can explain to you what that means. So you said it was based on the Santa Clara County ordinance, and that takes 13 pages, whereas ours is only 3 pages, okay? So you can immediately see there's a whole bunch of stuff missing, all right? And we think there are some important articles that are missing. our ordinance is a little, wishy-washy, I would say. And the Santa Clara ordinance, which I have here, is much more specific, and it also deals with the vendors that we buy things from the city. And I'm not sure that you are including vendors in this ordinance, but that was, generally speaking, the ordinances that are already out there do deal with the vendors. So I'm going to leave it to our other speakers to tell you about some of the missing parts, articles. Now, we've waited 7 years. We actually don't want to wait much longer. So I'm not asking that this be delayed, okay, because we're asking for a few changes. Maybe you could forward it as it is, but codified. And then maybe later it could be revised once it's been adopted by the City Council. That would what I would suggest. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Roberta A., followed by Aram J.
Yes, my name's Roberta Alquist. I've been in Palo Alto since 1963. We're glad this is finally coming before the council, but we feel that this current 3-page ordinance really doesn't have much teeth in it. And we'd first of all like you to codify it. It's not a temporary thing. Codification means it's a permanent thing and the city takes it seriously. We'd also like you to look at the Santa Clara ordinance, which addresses 3 things we think are crucial. One is equal remuneration, including benefits and equal pay with respect to work of equal value for everyone, for women. D, protection of health and safety and working conditions within the county as a workplace, as well as among its vendors, including supporting efforts not to purchase sweatshop goods and regular inspection of work premises. And E, protection from all forms of harassment, retaliation, hostile work environments, and violent acts in the workplace. We feel those are key aspects of this. Without them, the ordinance really is not very substantive. And therefore, we urge you to quickly modify it so that these 3 pieces at least could be put into it. It wouldn't be very hard to do. You could just take it out of the Santa Clara County ordinance itself. If you look at Berkeley and San Francisco's ordinance, they're much stronger, much meatier. But if we at least got these 3 things in and you codified it, we would be happy, and we hope that you will do so and that the council will approve it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Aram J., followed by Michelle D. Aram, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
I see the, okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
So a couple of things. I was raised by a single mom who was a quintessential feminist, a lifelong member of the NAACP in here at Palo Alto, grew up there. And so this would be to honor her commitments in that, and of course my own. I don't find myself being comfortable with being on the same calendar speaking on this issue with Michelle Dauber, who I consider a despicable human being. She took a wonderful judge and did a witch hunt on Judge Persky. So for her to call herself a feminist and want to support this and all of that, she's not for women, she's for Michelle Dauber. But let me stay positive. And I could say the same about a Zionist wacko who's also going to be speaking, who doesn't see a problem with a genocide of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian women. but let me leave that beside. I promised myself I'm going to try to be a little bit measured moving into 2026 when I do speak. It's going to be a lot less frequently in the past. But we need to support this ordinance and we need to expand it. We, look, I've got an article here, letter from Eleanor Roosevelt to my dad, so there you go. We've got somebody who's been part of the family history for a long time. So, in support of my mom, in support of feminism, let's look and find the best ordinance when we bring it to council. And by the way, I don't want to leave you out, Vicky. You have been horrible refusing to take a stand, even to allow the city council to discuss a ceasefire resolution. I've written you many times on it. So, no, I'm not. I know you're going to be the next mayor, but am I happy about that? Do I consider you a feminist? Absolutely not. You can talk all the good talk you wanted, but you were responsible. You were complicit in the death of small Palestinian children, thousands of them. You continue not to speak out on the genocide. So, on you individuals trying to talk that talk repulses me. The ordinance itself, Cheryl, thank you for doing the work for 7 years. Let's get this taken care of. Let's continue to speak out for women's rights. We've got to have equal wages. We've got to have more women in politics. We got to have more Black women, more Hispanic women, more people of color generally active in that. It can't just stay an all-white movement, an all-Jewish movement. So let's do what we need to do. And thank you for allowing me to talk tonight on this important issue. Oh, and by the way, Greer, I know you love Michelle Dauber too. Maybe we have one thing we agree on.
Our next speaker is Michelle D. Michelle D. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Sorry, 1 second. Michelle D., you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Good evening. This is Michelle Dauber, and I am a professor of law at Stanford Law School, and I'm speaking in support of the ordinance. I do hope you'll pass it on to the city council and that city council will pass it as well, given that we're living in a time when women's rights in every sphere of activity are under attack by both the Trump administration and the Supreme Court. I think that the section on housing and the reasons women and girls become homeless is very important and very welcome, particularly addressing sexual violence and domestic abuse. I have to admit that, in my opinion, this ordinance should be stronger, particularly given how long it took you to come back with it. The ordinance compares highly unfavorably to the ordinance that we passed in Santa Clara County and in San Jose. For example, it doesn't mention the mistreatment of women who are survivors of sexual violence in the criminal system, as San Jose did. And it doesn't address workplace sexual harassment, nor does it call for an examination of gender equity in all city services, as the county did. It doesn't provide any mechanism for ongoing monitoring or reporting and transparency of how the city of Palo Alto is doing in these areas. It doesn't even mention something as simple as ensuring equal access and addressing sexual harassment and violence in youth sports and recreation programs, an area where, we're all aware there have been issues both nationally and locally. So that seems like a very important oversight recreation if you were just going through city services and looking for some things to pull out. In my opinion, this is really, really weak tea. Nevertheless, given the length of time that it took to get this even on the agenda, I hope you'll pass it and recommend that the council pass it. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Rebecca E. Rebecca E., you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak at this meeting. I would like to, for efficiency of time, I do want to basically incorporate all of the comments made by the previous speaker, Professor Dauber, as well as the other advocates on behalf of having the city council pass after at long last, a form of resolution in favor of women's equality. I basically agree wholeheartedly with Professor Dauber, and I don't think I could say it any more articulately than she did. The only thing I would add, which is basically just a restatement, in other words, of what she, advocated for, is I agree that for the reasons given, that that the provisions of transparency and equal pay and access to all of everything that she pointed out, that should not have been removed. That said, I believe that, and I'm sure many would agree, that we should not let the perfect get in the way of the good enough, inhibit progress altogether. Perhaps if this modified ordinance could be presented to the city council in its modified and original form, maybe the city council will agree to put back in some of the provisions that were changed or removed. I know that often city councils, appear to kind of just rubber stamp committee recommendations, but sometimes they don't. And but I think these, and maybe you will decide to put some of these back in at this meeting, which I do encourage. Basically, I think there's strong reasons for all of them. The last thing I do want to say, well, two quick last things. First is, I should have said in the beginning that although I am Palo Alto's elected water district representative, I speak entirely in my personal capacity, not on behalf of the water district or on behalf of anyone else other than myself. And then finally, I guess one of the things that excites me about this kind of measure is the potential it has to really unify us. And I hope that we all can work really hard to keep these kinds of discussions positive and not make personal attacks on other people, especially those that seem to go against ethnicity. Thank you so much. Thanks for your work.
Thank you. That concludes public comment.
All right, thank you. And I want to thank staff for bringing this forward, and the city attorney's office for preparing this ordinance. I want to thank all the public commenters, many of whom have worked on this for years and years, with or without the thick folder. This did start back in, a decade ago at HRC making a recommendation to council. Council resolved in 2018 to pursue an ordinance, and we got there. In between, it went to PNS. There was a summit on women and girls that I read in the staff report, was keynoted by Lori Nishiri-McKenzie, who I have met with respect to the Innovation Lab over at Stanford, that she co-founded, the Women's Leadership Innovation Lab. So that's terrific. But it's time that we did this, so I'm really glad to see it before us. The lack of progress that we have seen over the years is surprising to me as I sit here in 2025. And unfortunately now I feel there's a degree of backsliding. And in fact, it's this lack of progress has led me to work with a small team of accomplished women, many of whom are, a couple of whom are former government officials, and we are working to launch a gender equity accelerator because we need to, and we didn't think we'd need to at this point. That is aimed at promoting balance in business, particularly in the tech sector where the numbers are very lopsided. But I think we see this throughout society, and so that's why we need this discussion tonight, and in my view, an ordinance like this. I took a look at the link in the staff report to the city website, and our current numbers are that our employees are 61% male and 39% female. Various reasons for that, but lopsided. In my personal experience, my career, it's always been very, very lopsided. Partly it's because I've been involved with things that are heavy on science, and that is often lopsided from a gender perspective. But when I went to law school in the 1980s, the classes were about 50-50, men and women. But that did not persist as we went out into the workforce. My summer class as a summer associate at a New York law firm, I jokingly call it the summer of 10 men and me, because that was our class. When I became a partner at that law firm, once we had opened an office out here, I was the first woman partner and the only woman partner during my tenure at that firm. When I went to another firm, and I was so excited, they had a women partners group. And but it was a firm with offices all over the world. I went back to New York to the litigation partners meeting, and I walked in and I sat down. There were about 40 litigation partners. I looked around, I realized I was the only woman partner in that room. And, you know, that was not in the 1980s. So that was quite frustrating. And even still today, only 22% of equity partners in law firms are women. 22%. And only 12% are law firm managing partners. Tech isn't any better. And I got to tell you, I have 2 daughters, and for their sake, for every daughter's sake, and for the sake of men and boys who benefit when we as a society get the benefits of women's talent duly applied, it's time to do this. And honestly, it's past time to do this. But let's start now, because to quote the Me Too movement, time's up. We got to do this. So that said, I appreciate this draft ordinance and the fact that we're looking at high-level principles and the fact that the city has different jurisdiction than the county, we don't do healthcare, et cetera. But I do think that I would like to entertain a discussion of whether certain things could be added to this even tonight before we hopefully make a recommendation to the city council. I particularly want to take a look at the economic development aspect. It's sort of a brief sentence there. And when we talk about taking measures to support the economic development of women and girls through the elimination of any known identified barriers, one of the ones that I think is we really have not made the progress that I would have hoped, and I know we will be calling out specific programs later after when we implement it, but I would hate to see this go forward without the word childcare in there. I think that if we said known barriers such as childcare, that would be a really important edit that I would propose. I like the public comment about looking at vendors and with whom we are contracting. So at the end of that sentence, it says identified barriers in X, Y, and Z, and public contracting, and I would say with vendors and others, because if we could remove the barriers by looking at the practices of those vendors, I think that would be important. I would love somewhere to get in the concept of equal pay, and this may be the place, but I have not yet figured out how to do that. I don't have any changes in this section, but I want to thank you for including climate. That often does not get included, and I will say when I was in Brazil last month at the United Nations Conference on Climate, there was a lot of focus on the impact of climate change on women and girls and how we can address those specific needs. And so I was very glad to see that included. What I would encourage us to do is to see if we can agree on, a few things that we might want to add. And then when this comes back to council, we can reflect further on some of the public comment and various things. And, if need be, or there's a will, we could further refine it there. But before I turn over the mic, I do want to ask staff, city managers, city attorney, about the codification. And I'd like to know both what, if any, limitations there are on its on implementing this or follow-up on this, and just why that choice was made.
Yeah, maybe I can start. So this is to council's discretion. Ordinances are of equal dignity, and they are all the law, whether they're codified or not. Ms. Spencer actually very accurately described some of the features of a codified ordinance as opposed to an uncodified ordinance. By codifying it, we give it a section number, and our code publisher then places it within our municipal code that is then accessible and searchable on our website. Uncodified ordinances don't get placed into the municipal code in a numbered section. They are still the law, and they are of equal dignity, but it is correct that they can be more difficult to find or locate by a casual person or someone who's searching through the city website. So it's a discretionary call for council. We kind of went back and forth as a staff. We did bring it forward as an uncodified ordinance because it doesn't immediately regulate third-party conduct. It's an aspirational and a thematic ordinance that the idea is that it's going to be built on in various ways in the future. But if council wants to codify it, we certainly can do that.
Thank you. I'll be interested in my colleagues' thoughts on that. And so with that, do we have comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Stone?
Great, thank you, Chair, and appreciate all the work that has gone into this years-long effort, nearly a decade's worth. A couple of questions. So first, within the economic development piece as well, the ordinance states that the city will eliminate any known identified barriers in the areas of employment, licenses, permits, registrations, public contracting. Were there any specific barriers that were identified through the various public outreach, listening sessions that the city had on this topic?
I think I'll take a crack at that and then open to the team for anyone who wants to add on. I think this as a foundational principle was one that was important, knowing, excuse me, that we have a lot of different areas happening both as the city organization, but also in encouraging our local business community. And so this is one that there weren't specific areas that were pointed out, but it is one that we know is really important and that we do have some influence over as a city organization. So just really important to make sure it was reflected.
Okay, and I agree with the chair as far as I think there's a lot more work that can be done on identifying kind of key barriers. The recognition of childcare is such I think one of the most challenging barriers for women in the workplace. I know that's one of the areas in my AP Government and my AP Microeconomics class. We do a deep dive into the wage gap that the chair mentioned, as well as also just kind of progress within the kind of both the business sector and the public sector, et cetera, and that childcare piece is such a huge burden. I know the county does quite a bit as far as, I know the county, when I was on the county HRC, there was the opportunity for childcare for commissioners to be able to have access to for free. So I think there are opportunities as a city to at least encourage to be able to at least encourage, or I guess, greater diversity within our commissions, within our council, to be able to offer childcare would be really beneficial. Yes.
And this isn't on the commissioner front, but in terms of city staff, that is something that, and Nick Racia is online, so he can add to this as well. But that is, looking at childcare was one of the issues identified as a concern even amongst staff at the city. And so we have been able to run a pilot program in recent years as well, just acknowledging the high cost and the importance of being able to have employees able to fully focus on their work. So that is an area we've tried to focus and do some work on as a city organization.
That's great, because I really think no one should have to be making the decision to have kids, especially in this region, because of the cost factors associated with it. I know my wife and I right now are kind of going through that same exact calculus of how are we going to be able to have children? Can one of us afford to be able to stay home and then live off of a single teacher salary? I mean, that is such a crisis that this region is facing. And I know Councilmember Liu and my generation, we are seeing such a dramatic decrease in child rates, and I think this is a big piece to that. So I'd love to be able to learn more about that pilot program, to see how successful that's being, and our ability to maintain both young mothers and young fathers in the workforce here in Palo Alto, but also see, can we expand that too within our commissions and city council as well. I mean, I think Chair is a great example of the power of strong female leadership, your capable leadership leading us through, I think, a really successful year on policy and services. So just wanted to acknowledge you and appreciate that. Another issue on the housing, I really appreciate the focus on helping survivors of gender-based violence and homeless prevention efforts to really be kind of gender responsive. I think that's critical, and in my mind, really should be prioritized in this work. And I kind of focused a lot on that when I was on the county HRC. What local shelters exist that are available only for women and children? And I know there's been some changes at the county level over the last couple of years that has caused problems. Can you just give a quick update if you know?
I don't know the details of it. I can say locally in Palo Alto, I believe our Heart and Home, that shelter is one of our rotating shelters that's specifically, I believe, for women and families. But in terms of issues in the broader countywide shelters, I couldn't speak to that without looking further into it.
And do you have any idea how kind of realistically we as a city could address this need beyond relying on local nonprofits or the county for help? And then, of course, by looking at the reality over the next several years of the incredible deficits that the county is going to be experiencing, I'm really worried that the county, making some very, very difficult decisions, is going to have to be making some difficult decisions as well on some of these shelter beds. And how can then the city step up to be able to make sure, especially women experiencing these threats, that we can support?
One of the things that we took into consideration related to our Home Key site, with it being a non-congregate shelter, was the fact that we had a lot more flexibility with being able to provide something that's a little bit more stable for individuals. We have heard from our nonprofit community that the congregate shelter environment really is not very conducive to someone that may be fleeing a particular situation involving some sort of domestic violence or other situations. And so I believe, just based off our work with Life Moves, that the non-congregate shelter of our Home Key site will be a pretty big opportunity for the city in terms of making something available for folks that need an alternative location if they're in a situation like that.
Okay, I'd be interested to learn more about that as well and other opportunities. And I assume, hopefully by passing this ordinance, that kind of opens the door to at least staff being able to really dive into this work a little more as well once there's that council direction. So Yeah, my last thing, I'm thrilled this ordinance is finally being presented. It has been far too long in development. Frankly, I'm a bit disappointed in the lack of specificity in how this ordinance will actually achieve its intended goals, and I agree with the frustration that we heard from some of the speakers tonight. I understand. I understand this is challenging work, but it seems like the county has a stronger ordinance. I'm pretty sure the staff report said we tried to mirror that. So I'm kind of curious, why didn't we, I guess, embrace the county ordinance a little more? And then I'm also just kind of wondering, is part of the reason for some of these limitations, especially kind of like on the economics piece, is it kind of legal limitations that the city has in sort of this modern era of Prop 209, recent Supreme Court cases, kind of prohibiting affirmative action, administrative kind of changes of grant conditions around all of this? Is that also inhibiting our ability to be able to maybe do what we really want to do?
I'll let Ms. Stump start on that, and I can add.
I'll start. So three things come to mind that council will grapple with as it moves forward with this type of program. The first, in comparing us with the county, Chair Vinker pointed out, I'm sure everyone is aware, that the county has additional areas, significant areas of jurisdiction that are not part of the city's purview, including running the criminal justice system and the public health system. And so we tried to focus particularly on thematic areas that are most relevant to our work in the city in setting up this initial statement of values and direction. The second thing is, yes, Councilmember Stone, you're correct that there are legal issues. There is both state and federal law with respect to a lot of the areas that have been raised by commenters and also council members as areas of interest. That's not to say that the city can't make statements or even local requirements, but it will require navigating those preemptive established law at both the state statutory and constitutional level and the federal level as well. And the third issue, which is significant, is resources. So many of the wonderful ideas that have been raised by commenters and council members are resource intensive, both in terms of staff time and programmatic elements. And I'm sure the city manager will have a lot more comments about that.
Sure, I'll pick up on that point. From general staff involvement and development of this recommendation, we've been focused on implementability. And so based on what the city attorney mentioned, in addition, looking at any administrative complexities, and in particular in the context of an ordinance, that if not crafted appropriately, we would be tying the council's hands and, quite frankly, obligating ourselves in areas that perhaps are not very clear to us right now. And that includes obligations for both analyses and studies that are not currently undertaken, and ensuring that we had some sense of what those expectations would be, as well as ongoing monitoring and reporting systems that would be at least implied, if not specifically called out. And also recognizing that depending on how the ordinance is constructed, that we would be setting expectations for process requirements on everything from whether it be purchasing to employment decisions to programmatic design. So, I think we want to set this foundation while also understanding that we want to be mindful of what we're stepping into before we overcommit.
Okay. Appreciate that. I think we all recognize this is a starting point. I guess in our recommendation tonight to recommend that the council adopt this ordinance, can we also include a referral to the HRC conditioned upon it passing this city council for the HRC to kind of continue to do additional work on saying, okay, how can we continue to effectuate this ordinance and get recommendations from them?
Well, I think it's certainly within the prerogative of the committee and the council to make that. I would share that I would expect that the HRC, as any body, would need the type of analysis, reporting, tracking that I just described. So we would want to be clear in what those expectations are in any such referral.
Okay, yeah, I think that's an important next step, and to make sure we keep the momentum going on this. I also think that we should. I think codifying this makes sense to me, because I do think it's important for people to be able to find this ordinance online and be able to access it.
I just wanted to add, Mr. Raish online, just seeing if he can unmute. Some of the efforts that the city is doing, oh, thank you, Nick. He can speak to in terms of efforts that HR has been doing over the years. I think some of the commenters referenced questions just around if we're really looking at different classifications at the city, the different work we're doing, anti-harassment. So I just wanted to have Mr. Raish just share for a moment of at least the work that the city is doing, and that's pretty foundational in terms of our status quo, even beyond whatever's written here. So Nick, please.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, thanks.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager. Nick Raish, Assistant Director of Human Resources. Just to reiterate some of the points that City Attorney Stump outlined, there are 3 laws already that govern equal pay. There's 1 at the federal level and 2 at the state level that govern equal pay and require not only agencies that are public agencies, but agencies across the board not to use prior wages in determining future wages. The other piece of that is heightened transparency. As a government agency, one of the amazing things that we already do is we have an abundance of transparency when it comes to pay, and we have a very structured merit-based approach to how people move through our set steps, whether those are in one of our many unions or in our unrepresented management. We do equity analysis every time we place someone in a range. That includes looking at everybody already in that existing range, looking at the demographic data within that, and seeing if there are any disparities between level of experience, level of skills, or other bona fide criteria that could differentiate individuals. The other thing I'll add is in March of this year, we just updated our policy against discrimination, harassment, and retaliation to make sure that not only it included everything codified in California's laws, which are higher than the state level, but also expanded even above that. So we have a higher threshold that includes more protected statuses than even the state does. So our rules in many ways already are at the aspirational statements within the policy brought forth to council tonight. And there are other areas, especially when it comes to advertising of our job placements, the way that we create and craft our language in those job placements, where we're continuing to broaden that equity lens and make sure that we use the most inclusive language in job descriptions and postings. So much of this is work that is already going on. And I will remind council of the recruitment strategic plan that council led us to adopt about 2 years ago now. Much of that recruitment strategic plan focused on how we have more inclusive and engaging processes across the board. So that work continues to today and has been very effective.
That's all great to hear. Thank you. And I think the rest of the council would really benefit from learning that too, and the community. So really appreciate that. Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I went over my time, but important topic.
Thank you. I appreciate the work from the city, from the public, from all of our public commenters. It is certainly an unsettling time. I think we are backsliding. Locally, there is a little bit of a glimmer in that our YWCA facility recently opened downtown several months ago, and that can be a significant new resource for everyone in the community. I think we should move this ordinance forward tonight. It should be codified. And this ordinance is a symbolic reaffirming that we can take to the council priority setting meeting, or that we can try to direct HRC to maybe brainstorm some ideas for us for next year's council priority setting meeting. But yeah, I don't think this is upon staff to just sort of directly implement the principles that we aspire to and that we describe in this ordinance, but for reasonable purposes are limited in what can actually be placed in an ordinance as we discussed. Overall, I actually like that it is quite tight and focused, and rather than, say, 13 pages, they're just clear bullet points. I think some of the language should be tightened up even further, just like explicitly mentioning childcare and some other terminology that could actually make the bullet points even punchier. So from here, what would we like to do? Are we able to make some language changes on the fly and then recommend that to council? Or would things need further legal review?
So a couple of options. You could suggest, if you have concrete suggestions tonight, we could note those, and possibly it will be clear enough that it could go directly to council. We could, if more work is needed, depending on the direction that council gives us, we can either do that and go to council or do that and come back to this committee at your discretion.
Thank you. While I've been up here, so it's not like long pondered, considered, and edited, I tried to capture what I thought were some of what appeared to be becoming consensus themes in some language that I just emailed to the city clerk. And so in the form of sort of a draft resolution, so we could put that up and you could tell us if it goes too far, is too specific, there's legal issues with it, but if not, it would at least start us on some of the, a discussion of potential amendments we might recommend tonight that council consider. And then if the city attorney has concerns about it, we can, deal with that as well. So, Madam Clerk, would you be able to share that on the screen?
Yes, I'll just need a moment to type
It's
it
a
up
little
to
rough.
transfer computers.
Oh, okay. Oh, you have to type it. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you could block copy it. Okay, so I will just, why don't I read it while she's doing that, if I can find what I just sent. Because what it was, it started with a recommendation that we, okay, now I can't find it. Here we are. So I wanted to recommend council adoption of the ordinance and that it be codified. Let me just speak to that for a minute. Even if the ordinance does have equal dignity, there may not be the perception that it does out there. And I think that for something of this import, we should have that perception of equal stature for this ordinance, and being able to find it is nice too. So I would like, if my colleagues agree, that we recommend to council that it be codified. And then I said with the following amendments, and you could put these in different places, but what I tried to do was to group into economic development. We're discussing there known barriers, and there are quite a few things that could be known barriers. And so I wanted to add after known barriers the examples such as lack of childcare, workplace harassment, and equal pay. And I'm glad that we're already doing so many wonderful things as was discussed tonight with respect to achieving equal pay, but I think listing it out there as our aspiration is important because it is not lived into in many parts of our community. So that was my first suggestion that actually incorporates three things. And then the one I mentioned that adding with vendors and others after public contracting, so that to the extent certain vendors would be barriers to achieving this equal economic opportunity, we would address that. And then the other was supporting survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, including with appropriate housing options. I think that housing and avoiding congregate living, that's one way, but there's other ways. And so the reason I picked community services is that I think that's a broader umbrella under which we can look at how we do support the survivors. So those are my thoughts as to things we could do tonight if, and then, we can ponder it between now and the time it would reach council. So I'd be curious in feedback from any and all sources, colleagues, and staff. Councilmember Stone.
I'll second the motion. And a friendly amendment to add a referral to the Human Relations Commission contingent on council's adoption of the ordinance. I think it's important for the HRC to at least start engaging in conversation, discussion about how can we further effectuate this. I don't think it maybe necessarily requires the full kind of council or staff analysis as the city manager described for those initial conversations. And then staff can work with HRC or maybe come back to the policy and services if that is going to be a more resource intensive process, but at least for the HRC to begin the conversation, I think would be helpful.
So do you want to say a referral to the HRC for consideration of implementation options or but I'm wondering if we should a little more narrow.
Yes, definitely.
Implementation, that may not be the right word, but okay, well, I would accept that amendment.
So just to comment and build on some of the earlier comments from the city manager, either here or at council, you might consider, because this is so broad, and even in this ordinance, which some have described as relatively limited, there are quite a number of topic areas. Council may find a more satisfactory process with HRC if you give guidance about what you're looking for. Are you looking for specific implementable first steps? Are you looking for something comprehensive? Or are you looking to focus in certain areas, et cetera?
And if I could add to that point, perhaps just using an example and use it as an opportunity for me to perhaps better understand what's proposed here. In number 2, the addition, where I read it in comparison to what's already here, it reads, cities shall take appropriate and timely measures within the scope of its authority to support women and girls' equal access to community, library, and transportation services. Those are clearly services that the city currently provides. And so our commitment under this ordinance I would read, to ensure that we are ensuring and supporting equal access. In the case of the additions, this appears to be, quite frankly, to a certain extent, an entirely new service line in supporting survivors of sexual gender-based violence, including with appropriate housing options. And quite frankly, I'm a little concerned with what the mandate would be with that specificity in programs and services provided by the city.
Well, the concept here, the HRC can look at what are specific things that would be appropriate for a city to do and within our purview, but there's a variety of services that could be rendered, or even just making sure that they are not somehow discriminated against, or whether it's policing or other things that we're not taking into account in our practices, any particular special needs of such survivors. But I was also trying to build in, including with appropriate housing options, because it sounded like there had already been thinking on the city's part about where and how such individuals might be most appropriately housed.
Well, and to my knowledge, there is not currently. And so I might suggest that that particular example might be better a part of the referral to HRC than a part of the ordinance that is being adopted at this time, so that we could better understand the implications and have their recommendations on how that might best be framed.
For clarification, when you say that example, are you saying housing or the entirety of paragraph 2?
Well, I was suggesting the entirety of paragraph 2. That said, our police department does provide support at a intake level on the first half of that phrase. But again, I would want to be intentional about what implications are for both the housing options as well as not having the ability for our police department to have clarity on what this would mean for them or mean in terms of expectations of them here tonight.
Deputy City Manager, did you have a comment?
Just agreeing with Mr. Shikata, and where I was previously speaking was related to services that I know that link to unhoused individuals when they are seeking services through the hotline. And so that is not as broad as all housing. That's a very particular portion of the larger housing discussion. So just wanted to bridge that information of that I shared earlier with what Mr. Shikata just referenced.
But it sounds like these particular residents are in at least a couple of different ways that we aspire to provide support within the rendering of our other services that is, informed and compassionate and appropriate. So I guess I would hate to exclude this altogether, and I'm searching for an appropriate way that isn't overly specific tonight, because I do think HRC could look at this more carefully and bring back to us what things are appropriate for a city to do. But I think if we're talking about supporting women and girls, and with the unfortunate prevalence that we know sexual and gender-based violence occurs, I would hate to not name it somewhere appropriately in this ordinance.
Understood. So again, literally at the risk of parsing here, so if that first half were to go into the ordinance, then the second half with the housing might be part of the referral to HRC.
So if we just deleted everything after the comma?
Right.
I'm fine with that.
Not that far. So, there you go.
That comma, yes. It's 2 commas. I should have been specific. Seconder, are you okay with the amendment we just did?
Yes.
Okay. And you have a further amendment?
So just to add some specificity then to section 3, could be referral to the HRC for consideration of strategies and policies to implement the city's CEDA ordinance. That's essentially my intention here of that referral.
I'm good with that. Does that help address staff's concern?
It does. I have one small thought on that as well. I know that Councilmember Liu referenced sort of some of this is foundational for the city as an organization and some of it is broader. It sounds like there was some thought of what would be the city's responsibility versus other organizations in the community. So for the HRC, I think it would be helpful for them to know if we're talking about this as just looking at the city as an organization, or if they are also sort of aspirationally sharing something beyond that. I think that may help in how broad and wide their type of strategies to recommend may go.
I'd prefer less aspirational and more kind of concrete steps and policies of what we can achieve. I mean, I don't really want to preclude them if they want to get into that, but I'd rather really see them more focus on some of the things that we kind of talked about tonight, childcare, et cetera.
I think I understood the deputy city manager to be asking a slightly different question of whether it was would be acts by the city as an entity, or whether we would want to have, convene conversations or decide if we could have any encouragement, incentives, whatever, for entities other than the city to behave as we aspire to.
Correct. It's sort of things under our actual control, for the lack of a better word, versus things that are under our influence that we may not necessarily be able to control outcomes of.
I like the word influence, and I would actually like to see what the HRC, I would like the HRC to consider that. They may decide that they don't have specific recommendations, but I would prefer that we give them that latitude.
Yeah, I'd want them to do both.
Okay, that's good clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Liu, you have your light on?
I think the important thing for the HRC is that we come back with ideas that are tangible enough to explore, but that also, to the city manager's point, don't require necessarily super intensive staff work. And I think it is also, just to underscore the point that we all agree on, should include everything that can be reasonably influenced by the city. So off the top of my head, there have been conversations at a state level for streamlining and permitting home daycares, which are obviously non-trivial to open anywhere, including in Palo Alto. And so things like that, that's a concrete sort of planning and building type change. There are various programs with their library with historical designations and plaques and things like that we could look into. There are things we could look into for the effectiveness of our childcare scholarships, or the effectiveness of our preference lists for different potential housing options. I think just carving out a list of, here are the very tangible policies that council could explore further, would be what I would be looking to get out of it. And then maybe in a hopefully priority setting meeting coming soon, we can take a subset or a package of those and say, we actually want this to be part of the work plan for the year. So I want to make sure that there's some sort of track or framework so that we know that what we're getting back will be for the work plan for specific implementation in the ballpark of a year or something like that.
A year?
I mean,
I'd like to hear more.
Our council priorities are going to be set in January, and I don't know if we have the information to go out and say, we need to streamline home daycares, we need to do X, Y, and Z specific initiatives right now. So the next big opportunity to prioritize a significant chunk of work would be, I guess, either mid-year or at the next council priority setting meeting.
I think that, we'll see what the HRC wants to do with it, but I would think they would have, or could have, they could return with short, medium, and long-term things. This is not going to be checked off in a year or 10. This is starting a process to change culture, honestly. That is often a 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing. You have some wins in different arenas. You gain ground in some, lose in others, but we're trying to move an entire ship forward. I think that what I hear you saying is you want some concrete things that we can do, and I appreciate and agree with that we can prioritize them in with the many other things that the city aspires to do. So if they come back with some concrete things, that's fine, and we can start, hopefully, well, whenever they can get through it, but I also hear you saying that a good way to make sure we sort of do track this and can actually make a difference is to put it in with our priorities, and I appreciate that and agree with that. I just think that I would like to give the HRC the latitude to kind of think about what do we do first? What do we do second? What do we aspire to in the long term? And then they may want to refine that over time. We'll have to see where the city council and the city takes it from there.
My takeaway from your discussion is it may be appropriate to not put a time frame to it. I mean, it will flow at multiple levels.
And if this is something going to the HRC in 2026, realistically speaking, you wouldn't be able to know what their recommendations are by the time you're discussing your 2026 priority objectives. And so it really is going into the HRC's 2026 work plan, and that's something we can discuss with the staff there. And then from there, I think we'd be able to define it a little bit more for what's then coming to the council. And just to be overly abundant on the record, there's not a dedicated person on this resource or a resource and task to this right now. So this is something that we will be figuring out as we go amid the other priorities that council has in our tight budget climate.
Noted, thank you. Any further discussion, or are we ready to vote? All right, would you please call the roll?
Chair Vinger?
Yes.
Councilmember Stone?
Yes.
Councilmember Liu?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Well, thank you all, and thank you to those of you who have worked on this for years, and thank you to staff for the thoughtful way in which you presented it tonight.
And
Okay.
that was unanimous, so theoretically it can go to consent, but given some of the changes, I'm not sure your preference there.
My preference is that we put it on action because there may be some further thinking or evolution of thought amongst any of us or not. But even so, I think this is a moment after 10 years that we should have a public moment, even if it goes through quickly.
Excellent, thank you, just wanted clarity.
Thank you for asking. Okay. Action item 3, discussion and recommendation to council regarding the 2026 priority setting process. Welcome, Ms. Alamos. I suspect you're approaching the table means you are presenting. Welcome.
Yes, good evening, Chair and Council. Lupita Alamos, Assistant to the City Manager. And tonight's item on the 2026 Council Priority Session setting process is a continuation from the November 19th Policy and Services Committee meeting, where we came before the committee to ask for feedback on structure and goals to focus the retreat. This staff report reflects some of the committee's recommendations and specifically focuses on the feedback heard on suggesting that we focus on mid-level goals and the priority of those during the retreat. As well as some of the other things that the committee provided feedback on, such as including ad hoc conversations and, if applicable, during the retreat, any KPIs. So the report outlines some of that feedback and really is just an opportunity to ensure that we've captured what was recommended at the November 19th meeting, and also opening up for any other feedback we would want to include.
And actually, I just noticed we had not included one reference point that might be helpful for the committee, which is that soon after the first of the year, on January 12th, we expect to give you a study session on the progress of the 2025 objectives. So we thought that that might be helpful leading up to the retreat scheduled on the 24th. And again, this is on the January 12th. You'll have a study session, get a readout on where we stand on completing the last year's objectives that will then set you up for the retreat on the 24th. Would also note in a subsequent discussion with the current mayor, he noted that part of the 12th might also be an opportunity to preview the agenda for the 24th retreat and finalize what we're discussing tonight.
That's great. And, I agree it might not just save time at the retreat, but let us marinate a little bit on where we are before we think about where we want to go. So I greatly appreciate that. Terrific. Do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no requests to speak for item 3.
Okay, very good. All right, so with this, you're looking for our recommendation to council on specifically whether we keep the approved city council priorities, and then any other comments about this process. Okay, great. Colleagues, do you want to go first?
Sure. I don't have a strong opinion about the priorities. They are broad, and of course, so many objectives fit across multiple priorities. I think it's more important to get the priorities tight. To get the objectives tightly defined and achievable and realistic, but also ambitious. I do have stronger feelings, as expected, still about tiering and how we actually have a system to both grade ourselves and make sure that we're always working on the most important thing. So There are a few different sort of ways we could actually maybe vote on tiers or try to like coalesce some kind of preference. I think the tiers should have some definition. They shouldn't be just totally abstract, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And so like priority ranking systems or like tiering systems that I've worked with before might have like one tier that's just can't fail, things that have to happen this year that if we fail are a major, that are both major accomplishments, but also just major issues if we don't get them right, like the Cubberley bond, where it's community defining, it's time limited, it's an opportunity for a huge success, but also something we can't mess up. And so being very clear about what the X objectives that are can't fails is really important. And then having the must-dos, the things that that are just top-level priorities, like SCAP goals or housing element implementation, where there are a lot of opportunities and it's clearly defined. And then there's some more nice-to-have things that we've maybe pulled from previous years into future years. And then there are lists of things that are good for the council to monitor, but not really council objectives. There are things in our current objective lists like Hamilton Ave storm drains or preliminary engineering for the transit center that are milestones in sort of bigger infrastructure plans, but not really council objectives. And I realize we probably like don't want to lose too much fidelity, or there might be some fear if we like trim the list too much. So I think it's good to have those sorts of buckets of like can't fails, must-dos, nice-to-haves, monitoring. And I think it's also important that the workload across those is distributed and clear such that most of our effort is committed to the can't fails and must-dos. And if the nice-to-haves are more of a stretch, like doing all of the nice-to-haves would over-allocate us somewhat, we can just sort of leave them in there. And maybe give ourselves extra credit at the end of the year if we're able to do some of those nice-to-haves that we didn't fully anticipate. Since we wouldn't have fully anticipated we'd be able to do all of them anyways. This is just like the kind of framework that we would use at Meta when I would present all of my priorities and my managers would present all of their priorities just up the chain. It works, it's fine. I think if people expect it, it will be like, people can articulate like what they want to fall in one bucket or another. And I think it will be useful. I think I'm not wedded to any particular description of any particular tiers, but I think some of those positive qualities of just being clear and being ambitious and giving ourselves room to overperform by doing more of the nice-to-haves and things like that are qualities we want to have and we want to be very explicit about going into the retreat.
Thank you. Councilmember Stone.
Yeah, I like Councilmember Liu's thoughts there. I think the tiered approach makes a lot of sense, allows us to be more intentional and strategic. I definitely think we should honor the policy that what we just kind of passed last year on having our priorities be a 2-year cycle. So I don't think we should change that. I'm really excited about the opportunity of really being able to now use this retreat, sort of as Councilmember Liu just described, as being less on arguing about the language of our priorities and wordsmithing and really being able to roll up our sleeves and get to work. So I strongly think we need to honor that policy and give that a try. And but then willing to try some new things to see if we could be more strategic. a big hope for me is that we'll be able to really get into the, I guess, the work plan, right? In more depth there, because this last year, we weren't approving the work plan until May. And so I think that's, so I think we can streamline this much better and make it a more beneficial retreat.
Well, I agree with my colleagues, so thanks for bringing this forward in this way. I do think we would benefit from really talking through what we mean by these priorities, what we like to see, and not just, wordsmithing for things that, pretty clearly would be on our list. So I also agree that we should keep the same priorities as last year for two reasons. One is we wanted to try to do the 2-year cycle. And two, I don't see a good reason to change them. So to me, it was kind of the rebuttable presumption or the default. And then if there were a reason that something had evolved, either in our thinking or our context, we would change it. I don't feel either of those are the case. And I think those 4 priorities remain ones that are appropriate for 2026. And thank you for putting the retreat outline draft in the staff report. That is a way to kind of effectuate what we're all trying to do. And I think it looks good from that perspective. So if we start with this, overview and orientation about the focus, because it is a little different than in years past. And so we remind people, not just council members, but the public who might be attending, that we've kind of done a thing that took a lot of hours in prior years to find those 4 priorities. And then to move on to the discussion of mid-level goals. That's something I know I've pushed a lot, but I do think it does kind of connect between the high-level sort of categorical directions and the sort of tactical, we want to do this and then this and then this. It's like, how do we prioritize it so we figure out what it is we want to do and what falls into the categories George described, which makes sense to me as well. And I know, Ms. Alamos, you pointed me to, and I can't seem to put my hands on it right now, where there has been some effort to do that. Could you remind me where that is?
Yeah, you can see that in the last quarterly update that was Q3 on the November 3rd agenda. The summary table has those kind of subheadings in the spreadsheet, the summary table, and then also in the actual quarterly update summary that has each of the objectives in more in depth for that update. You'll also see those listed.
And I would note, though, that those are subheadings, as Ms. Alamos pointed out, as opposed to goals.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a distinction between what we've done to date and what the committee is discussing, and we welcome having a discussion of a more both high-level but specific goal statement within each of the broad priorities.
Thank you for that. I think that if we saw sort of the headings and the groupings, it might help us be able to formulate those goals. But I agree with you, those are different things. It also might help us do the prioritization that my colleagues think are like, because I seek, that's the word, I can't quite get the words tonight, that my colleagues seek, as do I. And so, honestly, if I were chatting about this, if there's any way we could pull that up and just sort of to see it so that we can know what we're talking about, that'd be great. But I think that if we can even perhaps show those to colleagues as we ask them to come with their own thoughts around mid-level goals, that might help their thinking. And I know there was a question about should we ask for those ahead of time. My own thinking is probably not, because it's going to be, it's a busy time in January, and then it's kind of who put what list in when as opposed to homework. I don't want people to come fresh that morning and try to figure it out, but I think if they know it's kind of their homework, and at the beginning of the retreat, they would have a chance to offer their version or maybe turn them in on their way in and we can put them up. I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts on it, but I think it'd be nice to arrive with them after hearing your January 12th update.
Well, exactly, and you'd almost think we designed it this way, but the fact that we'll have that study session on the 12th, and again, an opportunity for the committee to share your thoughts on how it leads into the retreat, and I think it certainly primes the pump.
That's great, because yes, you're absolutely right. We could show them that list at that January 12th, get initial thoughts, you'll reflect on that, we'll reflect on that, and then come again together. You know, I used to do work at a foundation that convened people on policymaking, and we always called that second judgment. And, you know, after you hear everybody else's idea and then re-synthesize your own thoughts, that second judgment is often something that's more stable and collective wisdom. So after the discussion of the suggested mid-level goals, to move on to selection and prioritization of mid-level goals, that makes good sense. And then we can talk about, well, so that's kind of, I guess, under this proposed agenda, that's as far as it goes. So then I take it staff would go back and find and propose the corresponding objectives. In other words, create the placemat. Is that right?
Yes, though I think our goal would be to get as much as we can get done on the day of the retreat, such that we reduce, if ideally eliminate, you know, the back and forth or the need to have a lot of follow-up, because I think all of us, and the council certainly expressed this, don't want to have iterations going until May.
So then I would suggest that we either, I'm not sure which way you're going, but if we were going to have some of those more specific objectives, that then we add an agenda item where we discuss those, or we sort of socialize that perhaps we're not doing that. So I don't know which way you're.
The latter. So that the council, if you can identify your mid-level goals, that staff on that day will give you a sense of what we think at a finer grain detail might be able to accomplish during the year. It ideally, as a body of work itself, would not need to come back to council for approval. You know, we could do an information report that lets you know, here's how we're planning to proceed, and then identify the best way to close the loop to ensure that we're in alignment.
I'll stop talking, give my colleagues a chance in a moment, but I would like that. If I think what I'm hearing is, so we would sort of mid-level goals, council is now done, staff does what staff does and implements by creating the more tactical specific list of objectives, and then would feed that back to us to tell us, you know, how you're living into this. But that's not at that point a council level discussion.
Right.
Got it. I like that personally. And then just so I can complete this before I turn over the mic, then after the discussion of goals, we would move on to a discussion of ad hoc committees and other strategies to achieve the goals at the council level, which I do quite like, because I do think that the discussion of the ad hoc committees last year was really useful. And I know at that point we were trying to skinny them down, and we've had another proliferation, and we can look at, you know, what are sort of the new needs of this 2026 year, what veins of work should be continued with ad hocs, and what ones are not needed. So I think that's useful. So I quite like the outline. I guess my last comment would be that, of course, while all of this planning is wonderful and good, and I look forward to it, as staff often cautions us, we need to remember that it's the things that we don't know now that we're going to need to do in the next year that are going to parachute in to some of these goals. And of course, we'll have to all be flexible about them as we proceed. So, okay, great. Thank you. Colleagues, further comments? No? Okay, what do you need from us on this item? Do you have?
Yeah, so we would just need a motion to recommend that recommend the retreat reflect in general the outline as discussed here, and that the council continue the 2-year priority, continue the priorities as this is the second year in the cycle.
Okay.
And so certainly invite the committee to do that if you'd like to give us specific direction. I think given that our next step would really be this study session on January 12th, that again, you could give us as specific a recommendation as you'd like to here tonight. As an alternative, quite frankly, we would take the feedback we've received and report this to the full council as a part of that study session on the 12th.
Yeah, I somewhat prefer the latter. I don't know that the retreat agenda needs to be a city council approved thing, and we could have more flexibility, honestly, if it's not. And I don't remember it being one previously. And so, but yet, I do think making a recommendation on the priorities we should do, and then however we phrase what you just said. So I would move that we recommend to council that it keep the 2025 approved priorities as our 2026 priorities, consistent with our prior policy, and that, I don't know, is that all, as far as we need to go?
I think it is.
And then staff can come back on the study session to reflect back some of the feedback we heard from the committee for full council review and discussion.
As it relates to the format of the retreat itself.
Great, and we can get our colleagues' feedback at that point, which would be terrific. I'd like to have that before then, too. So do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? No, okay, we're being efficient tonight. Would you please call the roll?
Yeah, can you just confirm that I captured the complete motion, please? I'm not sure if I missed something on the second part.
Recommend City Council, recommend to the City Council that it keep the 2025 priorities for 2026. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Chair Vinker?
Yes.
Councilmember Stone?
Yes.
Councilmember Liu?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all. Okay, we're getting there. Action item 4, review and recommendation to the City Council on suggested changes for the City Council Procedures and Protocols Handbook, and it's important to note this is Councilmember Stone's favorite item of the year.
That's the reason he stood up for a stretch break right then. Thank you. Good evening again. Chantel Cotton Gaines, Deputy City Manager. This is the first time we're bringing your Procedures and Protocols Handbook back to you in a couple of years. So just to reorient the committee, this is the guiding document with principles on sort of how you run your meetings and the work of the City Council. And we did a comprehensive overhaul with a lot of hard work from the folks sitting here and the rest of the City Council in 2023, going into early 2024. And so this is our first time reopening the handbook since that comprehensive overview or overhaul. And so the staff recommended items we wanted to point out to the committee today. There are just a few things that we are recommending to add or change in the handbook. We also solicited suggestions from the City Council members of items that you have interest, you, the broader 7, you have interest in updating in the handbook. I'll briefly go over the few items, and then I'll turn it over to the chair and proceed how you would like to on this item. The summary of the suggested changes by city staff are on packet page 41. The first one is a recommendation from this committee, which is to review the handbook to amend the handbook to allow committee chairs the discretion to call for a January meeting.
That item and the next item, which is amend the handbook to change the frequency of handbook review to be every other year. These are two actions that you already took at this committee and recommended to council, and they are on the council consent agenda for December 15th. And so congratulations, you've already done your work on the first two. The next two suggestions, the third one is updating the handbook to reflect state law changes regarding teleconferencing. This is based off Senate Bill 707. There are lots of details regarding this bill, both in this agenda packet with the staff report, as well as some of the initial proposed changes. We also have information in the staff report about our proposed timing for making all the rest of the changes we will need to make with that comprehensive Senate Bill 707 set of changes. The last item from staff is, this is following up on one of the items that came the last time we looked at the handbook, which is updating the proclamation language in your handbook. So the last whole city council action on that was staff, please do a draft of the proclamation language and present that back to council. And so our city clerk's office has done quite a bit of work on that, and that proposed language is in the draft handbook that's included in the packet. So those are the 4 items that our staff generated, mostly a reflection of the work from the city council. And then way on packet page, give me a moment. There are lots of pages. On packet page 103 are the list of items coming from city council members as proposed changes as of the December 1st date that we asked for changes to be shared by. There were no proposed changes from Councilmember Lithcott-Hames, from Mayor Lowing. He suggested language around clarifying that a mayor can serve multiple terms, including consecutive terms. He has explanation text there of noting that this is something that isn't often done, but just wanting to be clear in the handbook of what the expectations, what could happen. Lastly, there are quite a few changes from Councilmember Burt. I will high level go through them and turn it over to the chair. The first relates to study sessions, and whether there's a way to formalize the conclusions from council in study sessions, and maybe listing them as action items is his suggestion here. The second is related to boards and commissions, so providing boards with training for making motions, early city council review of whether to perform, actually, I'll talk about the categories instead of going through each of these things. So boards and commissions is the next section. City council member comments and the length of time. The consent calendar, he has 2 suggestions there. City council meeting schedule, there are a few suggestions there. Referrals to standing committees, clarification on the role of council liaisons to boards, city event sponsoring policy, staff role supporting city council representatives on regional bodies, city council committees, and lastly, clarifying the process for creating blue ribbon task force. So those are all the ideas that have come to date regarding the handbook. And that's it.
Thank you. And just for clarification, the 4th recommendation from staff on proclamation issuance, is that the proposed language in 3.2, that redlined language, I guess paragraphs B and C?
Let me pull it up just to verify the section number. Give me a second. And what was the section number one more time?
I'm looking at 3.2, it's B and C, there's new language. It's more to do with like how we do it, when we do it.
Yes,
Okay,
that is the language. If it's red line there, then that's the language, yes.
Yes, it is. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no requests to speak for item 4.
Thank you. Okay, well, I think what we should do is, if anyone has anything they want to lift up with respect to staff's changes, proposed changes, 2 of them we've done, so staff's 2 new proposed changes, or our colleagues' comments, or anything of your own that you would like to lift up, now is the time.
I think the red lines look good to me. The one suggestion that struck me as something I'd like to pull up is the consent calendar in allowing speakers to comment for maybe 1 minute on issues that they wish to pull or vote no on. I personally find that useful. I think there's so many things that are difficult to fully anticipate the complexities on, and just understanding what other council members are thinking will be helpful. I found cases where people were just looking for another consent vote, and I just kind of voted to pull as a courtesy because it seemed like there might be an underlying issue there that I just missed. I don't think this would be disruptive for normal business, and I don't know why we don't allow this already.
You know, let's make any comments about topics as we go, as opposed to just one person going through several things. I think it might feel a little more organized that way, and since we can be a little more informal at committee here. Yeah, I also would like to see us revise, at least give it a go, on our consent calendar practices. I think that if someone were to speak for a minute on why they recommend pulling an item, if we truly limited it, and then if that item is pulled, so still requiring 3 votes to pull, but if that item were pulled, I would like to see an option where that could be put as the first item on our action agenda that evening for a limited time of no more than, say, 10 minutes, whatever time we think is appropriate. Because there's the possibility that if we're allowed to discuss it amongst ourselves or staff can make some clarifying comments, things can be resolved and we could just vote on the item that night. I've seen that happen in other bodies where a voting member has a question, they ask staff for clarity, they get it, and then they no longer have an objection and the thing can be approved. Otherwise, we necessarily have to have a time on a future agenda. There could be staff reworking of an item, and it may not be necessary. If we can't deal with it quickly, then it's necessary. And there are some things we want the full council to discuss. But I think seeing if we can just dispense with things that night in an efficient manner, giving ourselves that option, I would like to see that happen. Do you have any thoughts on the consent calendar?
I guess my concern about, I guess trying to think realistically how we would then be able to really truly get through it quickly. I mean, would we have to then agendize it for an additional public comment, even though public comment was allowed as a consent item? If we then remove it and put it on action, do we then have to allow public comment on that item again?
Not necessarily, as long as the council's procedures are clear that there's only going to be one opportunity. So you can provide it either at the first juncture or the second. You don't have to do it twice.
Okay. I also think, what council members should do is seek clarification from staff and not need to have to do it as an action item. I know I've been guilty of that myself, but I mean, we could just kind of, so I like what you're trying to achieve. I just don't know if it really, if it actually is going to do it. It just kind of seems kind of a complicated process to me.
So I was trying to add a little process around it because our culture here is to have a fair amount of process. But I guess I'm just keying off of what I've seen so many times, honestly, at the Air District, where they don't even require a second to pull. I don't want to change that. But what happens very often is a director will say, I'd like to pull, item 16, and so then we just don't vote on that. We vote on everything else, and then we say, okay, item 16, what's your issue? And they state it, and they ask staff something. And now, staff may not be fully staffed up and may not have the right people to answer it, in which case, we probably will agendize it. But oftentimes, it might be something simple that could get answered. Or even if we've seen some colleagues pull things when they want to agendize a certain item for discussion, and if it's coming anyway in a different forum, that would be an opportunity to tell them. We've actually had instances of that. So in those instances, what happens is I've seen the director just say, oh, okay, withdraws their objection, and we vote, and we're done. And it's happened quite a few times, and on some of the ones that are a little more of interest to more directors, you might have 2 or 3 directors ask a question, but within 5-10 minutes, we're just done. And then we don't have to go through all the additional noticing and putting it back in an agenda and in a packet. And I'd at least like to give ourselves that option. Right now, we don't even have the option of just getting rid of it.
Yeah, I think if staff can word the policy in a way that gives the mayor the discretion to be able to do that, because I agree. I think there would be some situations where it makes sense to explore, and then others where maybe the city manager says, we don't have anybody here to be able to present on that to answer those questions. We're going to need to reschedule. Then the mayor can say, okay, never mind, we're skipping ahead. So if it allows that flexibility, I think it's worth trying.
I believe, as it stands, we don't need to modify the handbook at all to accomplish what you just described. Typically, when an item is pulled, I would comment, and again, this is just our current routine, to say, well, we'll have to agendize this for another evening. The alternative would be to say, we'd be happy to have a brief discussion here this evening, again, assuming that the mayor is in concurrence, and then based on whether there are questions that can be easily answered or not, then if not, agendize it for another evening. I think that's really just something that we would need to have a common expectation on.
Yeah, and I think the reason I was proposing sort of a handbook change is to put a time limit on it, because so it doesn't just spin out of control, or we change cultures in a way that balloons beyond.
Modifying the handbook is certainly a good way to ensure a common understanding of what we're doing. So that's fine. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't do it. I'm just noting that we don't have to.
No, that's a point well taken. It's just oftentimes not our practice, since people don't state their reasons, we don't know what's going on. And like Councilmember Liu, sometimes I'll go home and kind of scratch my head and say, I wonder what was bothering them. And, if I knew, I could approach the whole reconsideration of it a little differently. So just allowing a little latitude. There are slippery slope issues here, and I think we have to be careful to put some parameters and guardrails around that. But I think at the end of the day, it could be more efficient, and at least that's the goal. So I'd be willing to try it, and then when we may have to reconsider the handbook earlier, Councilmember Stone, if we don't like what we've done. But I'd like to at least float that to the full council and see if we can do something a little different.
Sure, I see no concerns with that. I would like, when you're ready, to go back to Councilmember Liu's point, which is before an item's pulled, how that's handled, and if I could just reflect a bit on how the current structure is, but perhaps just worth reviewing, is there's this period of a question that could be received or given to staff in advance of the evening. Theoretically, it's the Wednesday or Thursday prior to the Monday. Then the staff responds, and that is shared with the entire council. What's a little tricky with the suggestion of having a council member make a statement is that I might find a correction or clarification being necessary for the statement that was made. And again, it may be a misunderstanding or what have you. And then if I were to respond to the statement, does that then feed a back and forth, not only with the council member who had raised the concern, but also with other council members who say, well, wait a minute, I don't quite understand that. So we're already then in a conversation where it may just as well be easier to pull it. Another option that we haven't really seen, but could be considered is the phrasing of the question that is issued in advance could telegraph, what is the concern? And so if the timing worked such that the council member knew on that Wednesday or Thursday prior that they have a concern with the issue, they could largely kind of telegraph that through the question and say, I'm concerned that this item may lead to some other unintended consequence. Is that true or not, City Manager? And we could respond, and that's a way of communicating to the council in advance what that issue might be.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I think the key is communicating in advance and being ready to do that on all of the consent items, because there's a lot sometimes, and making sure you're well prepared on the action items while we review the other ones. Sometimes they fall toward the latter part of one's prep, and so
Understood.
It's yes, in a perfect world, we would hit those deadlines and ask all the questions, because it's quite helpful. I mean, we certainly appreciate staff's responses in advance, but if the questions come up after that, we're in kind of an odd situation. So, but I do agree that the comments before an item is, I guess, before the, so let's see, so the concern is, so you're suggesting that the 1-minute statement be at the time that they pull in case others might choose to join in it? Is that the idea? Yeah, I like it on the one hand, but I guess I'm more concerned about the issues that the city manager raised. But that said, if it does get pulled, I would like to hear at that point what the rationale was and see if we could resolve it quickly. Do you have any different points of view beyond what you've expressed? No, okay. So I guess the question would be on this one, do we want to, well, assuming and we can come back to this just to confirm it, but okay with all of the staff's suggested changes, I certainly am, whether we would want to make a recommendation with respect to the consent calendar, the two provisions. I would still limit it to 1 minute, but I would have it be after why they recommend pulling an item. And I had, for whatever reason, I had thought that's what was intended, but it may well be what you mentioned on that. And then having, once pulled, an opportunity to have a brief discussion that evening if it can't be resolved within whatever time period we want to say, 10 minutes, that it would be continued to a subsequent agenda. So I guess I would ask to see if there's if I were to put that in I'm hoping we can do just sort of one motion at the end. If I were to put that in the motion, would there be support for that? Yeah. Okay.
And in previous iterations of us looking at the handbook, it's fine for you to go motion by motion if you just wanted to go ahead and put an idea out there and just vote on it now so it's out of the way, or you can queue them all up together. Yeah, either one is fine. We also, just of note, do still share the entire list with the council just because that,
Sure.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure that was clear
No,
as well.
thank you. Let's do what you just suggested, because I don't think we're going to have a lot. I could be wrong, but perhaps we could just combine, though, the first two. I would move that we accept the staff suggested changes and add whatever it was I just said. There it is. Thank you, Madam Clerk, for, can we add, or maybe make that B and add oh, I'm sorry, you have staff. Look, you've got the whole thing. Okay, great. Do I have a second? Oh, you did second, I'm sorry, but I don't know. Well, would you like to second? Let's ask that.
Should it be polling and/or voting no, or just polling?
Well, they currently get to speak on no votes, right?
Oh,
The rule allows 3 minutes to speak on a no vote after the item is passed. So it's explain a no vote after the item is approved.
yeah.
So
Yes.
as I read the motion as written up, this actually covers both issues. It's before it's pulled and after it's pulled.
I thought we were not doing the speak on why they recommend pulling an item. It was only
Right.
if the item, speak for 1 minute on why they recommended pull a pulled item, or maybe that's funny.
Right, so I think, Nicole, you were on the right track, what you just highlighted, and perhaps we're going to delete, and then we can take up the other pieces as a separate.
So just if you just delete the word "and," does that work? Allow councilman to speak for 1 minute on why they recommended pulling an item if that item is pulled, and having it heard. This is not the greatest English, but I think it gets the idea across.
I think she's just trying to get the after pulled piece.
So they need 3 votes to pull for any of this.
Right. Oh. Yeah, just the construction of this sentence, I think,
Yeah.
is a little awkward.
It is. I think it does a job, but I'm very open to reconstructing it.
How about removing what's between the commas there on the,
Oops. Put it, just say if an item is pulled.
Right.
Allowing, yep, so put
Yes.
that at the beginning.
move what's in the comma, between the commas to the beginning of that sentence?
I don't know how clerks type with everybody watching them.
There you go. So
It's remarkable.
if an item is pulled from consent,
Yes.
comma,
Now, would we allow each one?
well, actually, I think as you had initially described this concept, the whole piece of council members to speak for 1 minute is somewhat unnecessary.
You're right, because we'd move to action.
Right, it's become an action item,
And if they want to use 3 of their 10 minutes that way, that's up to,
yes. So how about eliminate where your cursor currently is, eliminate to the comma, yes. And then you can actually take the and as well.
And then I think we should add, and continue it if it is not resolved within that time frame, and continue it to another meeting if it is not resolved within that time frame. And then that would be back to standard practice.
Yep.
Okay, so we're just giving ourselves a shot to do this. All right, we'll see what our colleagues think. Is that accept, so do I have a second, I think is the question. It's going to make your lives easier. I know it will.
Second.
Thank you. How old are you? Okay, when you're ready, Madam Clerk, please call over, unless there's any more discussion on this one. All right, let's go.
Chair Finker,
Yes.
Councilmember Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Liu,
Yes.
motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, what else might we want to lift up at this point? Yeah, oh, right, you were just getting started, perhaps.
I think limiting the amount of time, on city council member comments, I think limiting the amount of time per city council member, it doesn't have, it could be kind of a recommended, like the rest of ours, but I think 3 to 5 minutes, I don't really have a strong preference on there, but I do think sometimes they can, at least kind of collectively, I've noticed this year, it's gone fairly long at times, so I think that's an area where we can probably trim up. So that's, yeah, forgot how we're doing it. So I think that could be a reasonable change.
I agree with that. Do you want to put a number on it, or it's like 3 seems too short, 5 seems too long?
I know, right?
And as a reminder, when we moved this item up in your overall agenda order, there was a commitment made by the council to keep the section brief. And so I think this would be reiterating that point if you're interested in making the change.
Yeah, good. Yeah, well, it's a suggestion, so can we just do a range of 3 to 5?
Sure.
Okay.
What do you think? Well, George
If
is
it's a
always so,
suggestion, just make the suggestion 3.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
yeah.
All right. So move that we recommend limiting the amount of time per city council member and city council member comments to 3 minutes.
I'll second that. Just move it along.
I said 3 minutes, right?
You did.
Yeah.
And just for the record, this is procedure section 3.6. So the clerk is adding that in so we can keep track of where we're making changes.
Great.
And you can remove the -5 because we're just doing it 3 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please take the, no more comments. All right, okay. Please take the vote. I apologize. I was reading through the,
Chair Vinker,
yes.
Councilmember Stone,
Yes.
Councilmember Liu,
Yes.
motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. More comments, Councilmember Stone?
Just clarifying on our meeting, on the city council meeting schedule. I mean, we already have kind of a policy related to not taking up new agenda items after, is that after 10:30? Or 10? I think it's 10:30. Yeah, that's what I just want to make sure it is. I think it's a policy.
We're all checking. Give us a second.
Okay. Oh, it is? Okay.
Our city clerk, who's in the back of the room, says it's 10:30.
And that requires that if we do, that requires a council vote?
So it provides that the council generally does not start discussion of new matters after 10:30, and before 10, the council will decide and announce whether it will begin consideration of any agenda item after 10:30.
Okay.
And if so, which items will be taken up.
I think we've done a really good job as a council, and I think our mayors have been pretty good at being able to just kind of informally receive that feedback. So, yeah, that's it for me. Maybe one small minor thing I noticed on there's the additional compensation for mayor and vice mayor, which doesn't actually happen anymore because of the adjustment. Is it worth keeping it in there in case, I don't know, change of state law or?
Is it, Ms. Cotton Gaines, is it still in the handbook?
Still in the handbook,
We had to
yeah.
remove it because it cannot lawfully be implemented now that council moved to move the salary to the maximum allowable. But actually, we'll have to check if enough time has passed so that you are no longer at the maximum allowable. Because I think you can potentially adjust it every year. So I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
We're not implementing it. Should we look at whether we can implement it now? We couldn't before. Let us do some research.
I think we'll do research, yeah. So for the record, this is section, I think this is protocol section 4.1. And right now it says the mayor shall receive $150 monthly and the vice mayor $100 monthly to defray additional expenses of those offices. So we'll verify the dollar amount so we can know if this is something that should be removed or not.
Okay. If we're able to continue, I think we should, but if we're not allowed to do it anymore, might as well remove it.
Just on that point, it reminds me that when that came up, and this is always such an awkward subject, we had talked about creating a committee of citizens or task force or something to look at whether they recommended further compensation or not. Because there were actually a lot of citizens that said, we want you to work hard and, you get less than minimum wage, so let's take a look. And we wanted to outsource that and not make that decision. Because I believe, Molly, City Attorney, that there's certain exceptions if it's done in a certain way. And I'm not necessarily advocating for anything that's not appropriate at this time, but just sort of a reminder that I think we were going to do something we didn't do.
Yes, and at the risk of outing folks, following that action, staff inquired, because the next step was to have each council member identify a member of that committee to be established. And I would note that that's where it ended, that there were no nominations for members of that committee.
Yeah, and that's probably because it's also awkward to do that. Right.
When was that? I don't remember that.
It was perhaps 2 years ago? Does that sound about right?
George, you're off the hook on this one.
Before Councilmember Lou, so it's not his fault.
But it was sent out as an email?
Yes, a couple of times.
Okay, I have no recollection. Might be worth then trying that again in the new year.
Yeah, at least lifting it up. Perhaps at the retreat even, we could, it's not a staff priority, but I guess, but it's something that was just kind of left out there because it's such an odd topic, but there was a lot of interest at the time in having that conversation. We could even, because if we talked about it as a body, we could talk about whether or not nominating someone, like how do we find those people? Because it is awkward because you feel like, well, it's awkward for the obvious reasons, so I won't state them.
On our next item related to council referrals, actually, I thought this sounded familiar. One of your referrals was discussion of the creation of an advisory committee regarding council compensation. And so you had a conversation here. The follow-up was the request that Mr. Shikata referenced, and it sort of died from there. So on our next agenda item where we talk about referrals, maybe you can just re-bring that up if it's of interest to the committee.
Thank you. That makes very good sense. Okay. I had a question that was prompted by this list. Citizenship for boards or commissions, I would have assumed that was fairly clear. Is there an issue around that?
I don't know what animates that question. So I have not done any research, but I imagine that council could have appointed folks to advisory bodies that are permanent residents or have other lawful status that is not actual citizenship. And we could research this. I have no reason to suspect that that is problematic for you to select those members. And I don't know whether the intent is to not allow that or to codify that it is allowed or to pick and choose. These would be, assuming it's lawful, which I think it is, subject confirmation, it would be a policy question for council, whether you wanted to address this topic at all.
Okay. I don't particularly, because I don't think, U.S. citizenship is really the thing. Sometimes residency is important, but we usually know that because we have the unredacted addresses. That is usually clarified, right? Whether it needs to be a city resident.
It is, and I believe there is at least one board and commission that does not require residency, and that is the highly specialized, either the HRB
Public
or
art
the
does
ARB.
not.
Okay, that's a possibility as well. So there have been some policy choices made by council to allow some non-Palo Alto residents to serve, and that's specified in the code.
Yes, so thank you. I don't need to lift that up further. I just was curious. I don't think I want anything, I'm not advocating for a recommendation to council, but I did want to just make a comment on staff's role supporting city council representatives on regional bodies, since I sit on a few. And I want to say I have felt well supported. I think staff has been appropriate, generous in facilitating that. I think it benefits the city, so it's appropriate, but I feel well supported, and I don't know that I want to be more directive in this document about exactly how that should be done, because I think it's a judgment call, both on the nature and the volume of the support, depending on other responsibilities, the relationship to city business, and other factors too numerous to mention. So I do want to note that that is a thing, and I'm grateful for it, but I don't think at this point we should add more detail or detail into the manual. I don't know if colleagues have a different view of that, or if staff has a different view of that.
I'd just like to add that I'm very gratified to hear that you feel supported as one of the city units that does provide some of that support. I really appreciate the perspective also that it shouldn't be specifically codified, because it's very sensitive. Many of these regional bodies have their own staff, including their own general counsel, their own support staff, and they're providing advice and support as well. So the way that we support council members needs to be carefully handled depending on the particular body and how it works, and how we can integrate with that, support you in your work, but do so appropriately and respectfully in light of the fact that there is another body of staff support.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it depends on the particular need as well. So, whereas many of them have their own legal counsel, there may be things where there's the regional role and the city role, and we want to understand what the handshake is there. So it might be appropriate, but oftentimes not. And however, the clerk's office has been terrifically supportive, and I want to publicly thank them for supporting the remote meetings that take place here, not just by myself, but by several of us, because you have to notice it, you staff it, and even for ones where the city is a member, like NCPA, and we're meeting at 8 a.m. and I'm here, and there's the monitors up, the staff reports there. It's just really been terrific, and I do notice and appreciate all of that staff does to help with that. This, I would just like a little thought partnership on here. Again, on this one, I don't know that what needs to be put into the manual, but I would like staff's thoughts. So with respect to city council committees and the role of the staff liaison to the committees to develop agendas in collaboration with the chairs, what are your thoughts on sort of best practices on that?
Well, I think, as stated, that is always our goal. I suspect that the comment was intended to emphasize the in collaboration with, as opposed to staff taking the lead, or much less without consultation. So not a concern. I do think there are situations in which there can be debates over scope of the committee, and that come up as a part of that process.
Yeah, and I'm thinking not so much, well, it's certainly what goes on the agenda in terms of scope, but also timing, and obviously staff's work plans and things will affect that, things we might not have insight into. But there are also sometimes external factors, political things, pressures on council members, or where we're reflecting the views of the community that we might hear more than staff. And so I think having a healthy conversation back and forth in the agenda setting process. And on this one, I have to thank Deputy City Manager Cotton Gaines for spending a lot of time on the phone with me about P&S agendas as we try to balance all of those factors I just mentioned. And I think that's been a healthy thing. We've had such heavy agendas that it's probably taken more of our collective time than we expected, but it's been informative for me as well, and hopefully for you to talk through that together. I feel like together we come up with smarter agendas. So, to the extent that can be iterated, I think that's a healthy thing. Okay, so I guess having talked through that, and thank you all for that, I don't actually have additional things to recommend, but Councilmember Liu, let's turn to you.
I had one thing, and this is getting pretty oddball, but we have these buttons, these red, yellow, green buttons, theoretically, so we can vote quickly and easily without going through roll call. Do these buttons actually work? Could we get them to work? I think the momentum and time saved during a, say, 10 p.m., 11 p.m. period where we are voting repeatedly through the roll call and everyone forgets what they just voted for and what they're about to vote for, it's not ideal. I think the energy and the time savings for everyone would be non-trivial if we could either use the buttons or voice vote or raise our hands.
Let me, there she is. I was going to suggest the city clerk might want to comment.
While she's joining us and getting ready, there was a legal issue during the pandemic, which was that a voice vote was required when members were participating remotely. And so if any member is participating remotely, I believe that's the current rule. I will need to check, unless you remember, Mahia. It does require a voice vote. I don't know if we could switch back to the buttons if everyone's here. Do you know?
I do know you're right about during COVID. I'm not sure if it's been updated since, but I don't believe those work. However, update to the committee is that we are exploring a meeting management system where we'll have electronic voting. So hopefully within the next few months, we'll be rolling that implementation out. So there might be a feature where you're able to do electronic voting. But to Molly's point, we have to check to see if it may be required to do a verbal.
To read the vote out. Especially if someone's remote, yeah.
Thank you. I can just imagine saving 5 minutes from every meeting for every person, dozens and dozens of people, potentially, all the YouTube viewers, everyone gets a few minutes back, and that would be nice.
Well, thank you for raising that, because I also think it's interesting because then the order of voting isn't such a cliffhanger thing. Now, we all may wait to push our buttons until that last second. I assume there'll be a timer, but that raises a different question. We don't tend to do it here, but I've always wondered, couldn't one pass, or couldn't one change one votes before whatever the timer goes up? So, sorry. We could talk about it another time.
Procedure rules can be so complicated. So your procedures and protocols discourage abstention, but they do allow for it. And abstention is recorded it's recorded in the minutes as an abstention, but it functions as a vote with the majority. That's what your rules provide. You asked about.
What I was thinking is, so right now, I mean, if we change from this, it would moot this, which I think is a good thing. But as of right now, if the clerk calls my name, if I just said pass, until that vote is called done, couldn't she come back to me, or is that not?
Council could make a rule about that. Obviously, allowing people to pass could contribute to what some might characterize as gamesmanship. So you'd all have to be signed on to that, whichever side of it you landed on any item. There is a specific rule also on reconsideration of a vote. I believe the rule provides that a council member can change their vote at any time before the next item is called, but I'll have to check specifically on that.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking was not so much to move to gamesmanship, but wondering if we are there and we're just not doing it, which is good, but, whether that was currently allowed. But I don't need to know that tonight. I just have always kind of wondered that. But I'm glad we don't do that, because we could potentially disallow that. But if we're going to move to another voting system shortly, then it's moot anyway, so we don't have to worry about the gamesmanship. All right. Anything else on this item? All right, I think we're done. We've made our motions. Is there anything else you need?
No, so just procedurally from here, we will summarize the items that the committee is recommending for the city council. We'll also share the other items that were not pushed forward. And typically this is a discussion that's brought to the city council early in the year. We'll figure out exactly where that lands in relation to your retreat and other things that are happening that you already discussed.
Okay, great. And we have one more meeting of this committee of constituted PNS, right?
Yes, so assuming that your recommendation of city council was passed on consent this upcoming Monday, which is to give the chair of an existing committee discretion to be able to have a January meeting, then your January meeting is right now on calendar for January 14th.
Okay, great. Yeah, the reason I asked is I just wanted to, I don't know, it's not exactly the right time, but I just wanted to commend my colleagues and staff. I think we have done a lot of work this year, and I guess it is the right time because that's a prelude to our next item, or I could say that again. But so yes, let's move on to action item 5, which is report out on status of Policy and Services Committee referrals.
Yes, so thank you very much. This is an item we haven't always done at this committee, but hopefully we'll do going forward. Just to summarize the work that the full city council has given you and our ability to work through it, I will note that outside of whatever is in this memo, you've done a lot of other work with items that are council priority objectives and other things. So this is just summarizing the referral items that have come over the last couple of years to this committee. And so on the back page, this is packet page 98, we list the completed referrals in calendar years 24 and 25. The one that you all just referenced in the last agenda item, I'll point out is item 7 on that list, which is discussion of the creation of an advisory committee regarding council compensation. So I'll highlight that in the event that you would like to do anything with it. Other than that, I'll focus on the items that are on the previous page, which is packet page 97. The pending referrals for this committee right now are the seismic ordinance update. We're planning to bring this to the committee in early 2026. It's looking like February or March at this time. The council member referral process follow-up, this has to do with, this committee actually discussed that already with how you would maybe have interest in changing how referrals can get to committees. There was request for additional analysis, and so staff needs to bring that item back to you. Our anticipation is that's also early 2026. There are 2 other older referrals. And these 2 I wanted to flag for the committee and see if you have the recommendation to keep those on the work plan going forward or not. The first one is referral for a joint city council and board commission member meetings. A lot of work has been done since this referral has come. The idea of this was establishing a frequency for joint city council meetings or policy and services committee meetings with boards and commissions. The note that we have here is we'd like additional information on this item. The mayor and vice mayor have met with board and commission chairs over the last years, and as well as the work plan discussion. Some of them were actual council discussions in this last year. So we just want a clarification if further work is needed to really fit the interest that the council had on this item. Similarly, for the next referral, which is referral to support neighborhood programs, this came at the end of 2024. No, sorry, this is a prior year. The Policy and Services Committee are being asked to review and make recommendations for any initiatives to support and strengthen neighborhood programs. And the city council has since then had your council priority focused on health, community safety, wellness, and belonging, as well as all of the town hall programs that we've been able to do over the last year, as well as increasing funding for Know Your Neighbors grants, et cetera. So we want a clarification really from the committee if the efforts that are taking place are really meeting the intent of this item, and is this something that we can mark as completed, or if there was something else the committee wanted to further explore. So really, it would be great to get any thoughts from the committee on those two items in particular. And that's it for me.
So I'm just want to clarify, the referrals completed. Oh, so item 7, we hadn't done that at the time the report was written, had we?
For item 7, we marked that one as completed because the committee had some discussion here, and we did as many follow-up steps as possible to try to create that committee, and it sort of just stalled out.
Right.
And so if this is one that the committee would like to recommend to put back in play, we can put it back on the pending list, but there was no further staff action on that one, so we marked it as completed.
I see. Okay, thank you. Are there any other clarifying questions before we check on public comment? No. Do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no requests to speak for item 5.
Okay, thank you. So I think staff is looking for, on particularly the last couple bullets, right, to see whether there's ongoing interest in taking them up at this committee. Is that right? Okay.
Correct. If there's interest, we'll include them on the work plan for this committee for next year.
Okay. So what I would ask is that we talk about those two, and then that last one on and just finish our discussion on the Council Compensation Advisory Committee. So thoughts? Councilmember Stone?
Sorry, you said continue the seismic ordinance update and the referral process? Is that what you meant?
So those first two, I think they're going to do.
Yes.
So I think it's the next two, they're asking whether we want more to happen here.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes. Our question is, have we sort of fulfilled the nature of the referral, or if there's further work to do?
I mean, I guess there could be some more. I mean, I'd like to see a more formalized process for youth council being able to participate and to have at least an annual kind of joint meeting. I think what has been established with mayor and vice mayor meeting with board chairs and vice chairs has been really effective and a good way to be able to share concerns from the various boards and commissions. So I don't know if that needs to be, all this needs to be a referral that comes back to policy and services, but I would also not be against it. And then I think on the last one, referral to support neighborhood programs, I think staff's been doing a great job on that. We just had the discussion about town halls, so I think just kind of continue to do what we're doing. I don't think we need to continue referral. I'm trying to remember, is this referral coming out of, there was a colleague's memo that I had oh, it is? Yeah, I don't need to see this move forward.
I appreciate your thoughtful nature there.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I like the idea of having some kind of meeting with the PTC and HRC, maybe in particular. They create work plans. At least on the PTC, we didn't take actually filling in our work plan very seriously. It was a box checking exercise that we figured wasn't read, and there weren't that many options to actually influence and say, hey, we actually want to work on this thing. And now on council, I would love to both get actual ideas and thoughts and priorities and would also love to be able to share our priorities as well. Not sure totally what that looks like. A full joint meeting between council and PTC and council and HRC in addition to our normal schedule is just too much. So there's still something there, like we are going to, I guess we pulled the council work plans off of consent recently, and that will be an opportunity to at least have a sort of one-way conversation where within council we'll discuss the work plans, or would we actually have
Yes,
the
we
chairs
would expect
there?
the chair, at least the chair, if not chair and vice chair, and any other representatives they choose will be invited to participate in that discussion. And that includes, see if I get it right, well, certainly it's already scheduled tentatively for February, I think the first meeting in February, HRC, Public Art Commission, and the Parks and Rec Commission, as well as, I'm missing one.
If I could chime in here, scheduled for February 2nd, it's going to be ARB, HRB, PTC, and UAC. The other 4 commissions will be tentatively scheduled in March.
Okay, that's great.
And so with those discussions scheduled for the work plan, I think that's sort of also capturing the nature of this, and thus the reason the open question of, is this still an item that needs to be discussed at this committee?
Yeah. So my thoughts are that, yes, it is, just simply because I don't know that it needs to take a long time, but I know one time, I believe it was on PNS, we had the boards and commission chairs come. And then this year, the mayor and I sat down with the board and commission chairs. So it's kind of 2 different models. There's pros and cons to each. And I totally agree about the youth commission. I think giving them an audience, whether it's with this committee or the full council, but talking about what we do when that doesn't add so much work to everybody's plate, I think we should just kind of look at that holistically, and I'd be curious what staff's recommendations are on that as well, because you have a really different window into the work of each of those bodies. So I would like to see that actually come here. I thank and agree with Councilmember Stone about not needing the neighborhood programs. They're super important, but we have been doing that. I think we've fulfilled the nature of the referral. And I actually think that we should bring 7 back on the completed ones, because we kind of dropped the ball. We didn't really do it. We dropped the ball. The discussion of the creation of the advisory committee regarding council compensation, just because I remember at the time there was a fair amount of momentum behind it, and then because and what we could discuss are things like, would we recommend to council that we create that committee differently, like maybe former council members, and there's a pool of them, and staff reaches out and asks who's interested to serve. Because I think it just became too awkward for us to individually say, I want this person, and Greer's person fights with my person. I think this committee could discuss whether there's a better way to recommend to council to constitute it. And again, I don't think it needs to be a lengthy item, and if it goes back to council and there's just no further interest, it gets dropped. But it gets dropped in a way that feels a little more like we did the thing. So those are my thoughts on these. Anything further from my colleagues? Any objections, concerns? No?
I don't need a motion on this. This is just very helpful. I'll use this feedback in creating the draft work plan for Policy and Services Committee for next year, which will include all the items that we had left over from this year. You did a lot of work. There's just a lot more to do. And then the couple of referral items that are remaining.
Well, thank you, and thank you for being so nimble on all of this. We've been juggling a lot, and I'm really grateful. I do think we did do a lot, but I'm also really excited that seismic is coming back. That's such an easy thing to push, but it's also such a critical thing, so I'm really glad that that's imminent. So thank you, and nothing further. We'll close this item, and I guess we did speak briefly, but do you want to reiterate the future meetings and agendas?
Yes. There are 2 items for the January meeting, and in this very second, I'm not remembering them, so let me just pull that up.
Oh, let's see.
I know.
Sure.
Just a moment, sorry. Okay, we have a follow-up on the nonprofit work plan, as well as the utilities reserves audit.
Got it. Okay.
Those are the 2.
Excellent. Thank you. And with that, and my great thanks for getting through 5 substantive items, we are adjourned.